started. At present, we have Commissioner Sapoznikov, Garrettson, myself, and Maribayashi, and Commissioner Harper. I'm not sure about Commissioner Huff and Fight Love, but I know that Commissioner Dink said he may not be there tonight. So we'll move on to approval of the agenda. Do we have any questions or discussion on the agenda?
Move to approve.
Okay, I have a motion to approve. Do I have a second?
Second.
We have a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Oh, there's, so the agenda is approved unanimously. And we'll move on to item. Oh, yeah, your name tag is approved.
I never actually hear that.
We're just trying to put it on.
Perfect. So moving on to item 3, we have announcements. And I see we have a new finance director.
So I will take the privilege, and I'm very excited to be able to announce that we have our new finance director on board. So Alberto Preciado is on day 3. Day 2, we made him come to a council meeting. Day 3 is at the Fiscal Commission, so he's getting a bit of a baptism by fire. But he comes to us from, most recently from Citrus Heights. So I'm going to turn it over to him to let him give an introduction to you guys.
Good evening. It's great to meet you all, and those of you I haven't said hello yet to, I will soon. I'm, as Kelly mentioned, on day 3, so I'm trying to hit the ground running as fast as possible. I can't remember who I said this to in the hallway, but I said I'm trying to get up to highway speeds on my bike, so we will get there. As Kelly also mentioned, yes, I was most recently at the City of Citrus Heights. Before that, I was at Citrus Heights Water District, so I spent about 9 years and a half, so I think that rounds up to 10, serving the community of Citrus Heights. So before that I was in Orange County at the City of Tustin, and before that I was in audit. So I've got a little bit of some municipal finance experience, and I will be happy to tell you all about it because I love talking about everything governmental finance. If you'd like me to talk to you about the Gatsby, oh man, you're in for a treat. But I'm happy to be here, and thank you.
Welcome.
Sure. While I'm speaking, we did have a meeting with our auditors on yesterday. It was yesterday. We have a couple of items that we are getting to them. One item that I think we're close to being complete with our finance manager. Hoping to get that done tomorrow. We have another item that I think is even closer to being done. We'll be meeting with our consultants on that item tomorrow as well. So we're looking at getting a draft in the next, hopefully, week and a half. And then starting on single audit for fiscal year 23 as well. Anticipated looking at potentially getting that submitted also by the end of next month. So good news on that front.
So we are a little bit behind the schedule that we published in the summer, or with the budget, I guess, like early summer, but hoping to make up some time, and things are not looking bad, so that's, we're where we thought we'd be.
Any announcements?
Good evening, Commissioners. I have no announcements, but it's great to see you all as always.
Any announcements from any fellow commissioners? Okay, seeing none, let's move to item 4, public comment. Do we have any general public comment? Okay. Seeing none, let's move on to item 5, the consent items. So we have the minutes from the January meeting and the updated SRI policy memo. Is there any discussion or comments on those? I noted for the minutes for the January 7th meeting that on item 3, I think there was a typo where we mentioned Vice Mayor Partida. I think her name we had as Martina on that. So just correct that. Okay, other than that, I didn't have any other comments. Does anyone else have any?
Move to approve.
Okay, we have a motion approved. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a second from Commissioner Madrashi. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any noes? Abstentions? Okay, with that, the motion carries unanimously. And we can move on to item 6, the regular items. And it sounds like we have a presentation from Ms. Yancey.
So I'll do a very quick introduction. We have Katie Yancey, who is the city's Economic Development Director, here with us this evening. Back in the fall, there was some conversation with this commission, and you indicated that you would like to hear about revenue generation opportunities, possibilities, etc. We are honing that in a little bit and focusing on revenue generation via economic development, rather than, say, like personal taxes or things like that. So Katie is going to give you an overview. This is intended for you to be able to provide us with some feedback. She's actually right in the middle of preparing an economic development strategic plan to share with the City Council. And I believe she'll be asking for your thoughts and input that will help her with finishing off the plan before it goes to the council next month. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Katie, and feel free to, she has a presentation, but feel free to ask questions and ask for any kind of clarification, et cetera, that you may need.
Thank you. So good evening. I'll bring up my presentation. Before I get started on it, I just wanted to take a minute to acknowledge that I got a couple of people here in the audience with me this evening, because as we get into the discussion about the objectives, sort of what are the general activities that we want to be taking on and figuring out what are the performance metrics and what might be some ideas about the timelines. I have some people here to support me. So I have Carrie Warwick here. She is the Executive Director of the Davis Chamber. Brett Lee, who is the Executive Director of the Downtown Business Association. And in the audience, if we need them, are Derek Dunworth, our Principal Planner, and Sherry Metzger, our Community Development Director. So in the staff report, there's some mention about like outreach activities. There's mention about community development versus business outreach activities. So we kind of brought the other subject matter experts here in case something comes up that I can't answer, but people that I work with closely on a day-to-day basis can. So I just wanted to take a minute to introduce them, and they may come up and say something during the public comment. So the title of this presentation was really strategic, economic development, revenue generation opportunities. We're gonna kind of walk through what each of those phrases means. What's economic development? What is economic development planning? How do we go about doing it? What are revenue generation opportunities? What are revenue generation interventions? What are the different structures of revenue generation that's economic development and what's not economic development? And then we'll get through some of the objectives where there are opportunities for revenue generation to lead the activities of my department and my partner staff. So that title is intentional because think of it as sort of your guideposts as I go through. It's not a short presentation, but I wanted to give you a background so you really could kind of appreciate what we're looking for and the kind of feedback that you have the opportunity to provide this evening. So starting with the nice Venn diagram, because these are very helpful. We're looking for feedback specifically at the area where long-term fiscal stabilization measures overlap with the economic development strategic plan. And in economic development planning speak, we call those economic development objectives. And so I'll walk you through that whole process and give you the parameters of what we mean by an economic development objective, and then give you some examples that were included in the matrix and the brief description attachment to the staff report. So starting off with the basics, what is economic development? It is not revenue generation, and although people do use growing the pie as a synonymous term for economic development, I like to be a little bit more broad in my description. It's anything that we do to really affect lasting change in the local economy. And it's not typically something that you can sort of like measure well in a model, because it's relationships, it's outreach, it's luck, preparation and opportunity meeting each other. It's that nudge that happens that makes things create that tipping point, but it's all intentional, it's all disciplined, and it's usually very strategic and thought out. And struggling cities do it, Thriving cities do it. It's not really something that you turn the faucet on to do economic development when you're struggling financially, although it's a great time to do it. There's always a great time to do economic development. But it does focus on things like fiscal resiliency and, most importantly, closing gaps in the market that the city can effectively close. We're not there to do things that the city can't do. We're not there to go tell the market to do things that we don't have the authority to tell the market to do, but it closes those gaps. And as you can tell by my folks that are here in the audience, it is a team sport. No one person does it. We all have to do it throughout the organization, and in fact, certain things that are happening in one part of the organization can derail efforts that economic development is making in other areas. So, love a good flow chart too. This is to help sort of visualize the economic development planning process. So we always start with a vision. Vision turns into goals. Goals turns into policies, objectives, and activities. And a strategic plan is going to deal with the intersection of policies and objectives. Where Sherry and Dara's work come in is in the visions, goals, policy. So we meet at the policy area. And the policies guide my day-to-day activities. They guide their day-to-day activities as well too. So you might want to see an example of what those look like. And so a vision statement that's in our current general plan is preserve a university-oriented small town feel. I'm paraphrasing here, but that's a vision statement that's in our general plan. So you're all nodding like, yeah, that sounds about authentic to Davis. That turns into a goal. So promoting sustainable economic growth strengthens that identity, and it maintains that human scale, that human pedestrian feel of the downtown, and it maintains that authentic sort of cultural rich lifetime learning quality of the community of Davis. That's the goal. Okay, that's what we're trying to do. We have policies, and those are the land use regulations, the guiding principles that tell us to do that, where they kind of nudge us in the direction of what the expectations are of staff when they're fulfilling those goals. And so you see here, we're looking at new incentives, adaptive land use policies that are ensuring that mixed-use, pedestrian-friendly development is occurring in the downtown. And then we turn that into an objective. That's where I live, is in the objective space, and that's where I'm asking you to live for the next little bit that we go on this journey together. And that looks like this, where we're very specific. We get down to this, we specify what it means to promote. So we are encouraging local businesses that serve the student population, that focus on the community's needs. And we attempt to do that with a time set, 5 years, and a performance metric, 15%. And that's what makes an objective an objective. It's not just do this thing, but it's do this thing with this intentionality, with this goal in mind, and with the time that it would be done. And you didn't get those in your presentation because I'm still working on them, and I'm still working on figuring out what's the right number, what's the right time frame, what can I reasonably do given that I am your sole resource for economic development in the city. And so I need to look at what I can reasonably accomplish with the resources that I have available. So I'm in that process of refining and look forward to hearing what your priorities might be, what you might consider a success to be, what you might consider a reasonable time frame to deliver some of the key proposed economic development objectives that I've included in this presentation. So the existing economic development vision, we touched on one of them, which is the quality of the downtown, but it's also included in our general plan. High quality of life, commitment to being a university city, sustainable, healthy, environmentally driven, and it also includes regional recognition. Davis does want in its general plan to be recognized for what makes Davis special. And so I included it in here because regional recognition ties to some of the objectives that were talked about in the staff report. What are our existing goals? Now these live also in the general plan, but the council also adopted strategic goals, and so I brought those in, and that was talked about in the staff report as well. And again, we see things that should look really familiar to you. Attract visitors, support existing businesses, find new businesses that fit within the Davis culture and are authentic to Davis, find sustainable and appropriate ways, be intentional about the economic development that we're having. So be a little bit picky, be a little bit choosy about what we decide to do here in Davis, and to address unmet community and business needs. So you can see that all feels like that makes sense for this community, and that's because these are long-standing goals that have lived in the general plan that the city council sort of evolved a little bit in their last strategic goal setting process. So these are my North Stars as I'm doing my work on the objectives. So I thought I might talk a little bit about policies because policy language can get a little tricky when we're talking about revenue generation. So I gave some 4 examples and showed you how they live on a continuum of fiscal stabilization versus like economic development. So here, we're talking about building grant capacities, and grants are great. Grants create additional revenue that would not local money to accomplish local benefits. So, but those are not economic development policies. Working on improving our grant capacity is a fiscal stabilization policy. It lives all entirely over on that sliding scale. Now we start to move a little bit towards economic development policies when we talk about things like managing resources efficiently, looking at reducing long-term operating costs, because where do operating costs get transferred to? They get transferred to the development community. So keeping an eye on those things, making sure that we're engaging efficiently with the development community, making strategic investments, that we stay resilient, so we provide good customer service. We're starting to move into that economic development policy because we care about those things when we're looking about the business climate from an economic development lens. Then we get to straddle both these policies when we talk about things like strengthening and diversifying revenue streams. When we're looking at mixing our traditional strengths, the things that we do well here, and the revenues that we already can count on are pretty solid, and we're just protecting those. And then looking at how can we then move into the emerging sectors that pair nicely with those existing competitive advantages that Davis has. And then what are these innovative funding strategies? So this city used to have a redevelopment agency. The redevelopment agency was dissolved in 2012, like every other agency in the state. 2018, the state constituted new tax increment financing tools. Are we looking at those tools as potential ways to kickstart the economic development engine? So that's where we kind of get into this discussion of living in fiscal stabilization and economic development. And then a policy that's just clearly in economic development is something like this, where we're saying engage in strategic public-private partnerships, where we're attempting to leverage private investment, private expertise, private risk. That's a big one. We can leverage private risk, private innovation to advance public initiatives that we would not be able to do on our own. And those are absolutely, when we talk about policies that are like that, those are absolutely economic development policies. And you'll see that those kind of color the economic development objectives I'm going to talk about with you tonight. So, what are the parameters for a good economic development objective? Because we like our guidelines in the planning world. They're measurable, they're time-bound, as I said. 1 to 5 years means it's a good objective. If I can accomplish it in 2 months, it's a task, it's an activity, it's just part of my day-to-day work. But if it's something that I have to be strategic about, it's going to take me 18 months to do, that's a good objective to have because we can measure over time what my successes are. We have to make sure that it's tied back to those very specific goals. It has to be the implementing agent of that. We have to live under our economic development policies. This is a key one. It has to be responsive to an identified force, a market force, something that's changing. The talent pool has changed. Davis is now the #1 semiconductor school. It's not, but let's say that it becomes that, right? We need to then change our workforce. We need to change our business attraction because now Davis has suddenly hung up its flag and said, we're the top semiconductor school. So we have to be responsive to that. And then at the end of the day, it tells me what I'm supposed to be doing on a day-to-day basis. It implies that. It doesn't direct. It sort of says you need to be doing these things. So those are the parameters of a good economic development objective. All right, now, as I said, we're going to switch from economic development planning to revenue generation. We got 3 main interventions that we can take at the time of a budget shortfall. We can engage in revenue capture activities. This is our fees are too low, our fines are too low. We could be enforcing on our parking and writing citations, and we're not. We haven't done an audit on our franchise tax agreement in a really long time. Maybe there's revenue that we're leaving on the table. Oh my goodness, we have an asset that I could sell for $500,000, not one-time money that we can go into the general fund and do something exciting with. I've done that once already at the city, so there are these other opportunities. But economic development happens in these last 2 columns. This is where we begin to see that we're attempting to leverage forces that are outside of us. We're looking to attract new investment. We're looking to get people to come in and title land or sell land to a developer. They're holding on to it. It's something that their family ran, this business on it. It's in our downtown, and we're like, hey, what if we sell that to a mixed-use developer who'll come in and put an apartment complex? And that's where we have that increase in transaction volume activities occurring. Monetizing city assets. That's where we take a city parking lot, for example, that maybe we're not paying parking fees on. We monetize that. We I'll say the dirty word, digital billboards. We put digital billboards on city assets. I'm not suggesting those, these are just examples. We engage in activities that support vertical development. So we look to create certainty in people's performance. We look to assist them with offsites. And then we engage in business, expansion activities. We engage in shop local campaigns to grow the property tax and sales tax base. So that's really where I live on the revenue generation interventions sort of matrix. So some proposed economic development objectives that tie into those two activities of increasing transaction volumes and diversifying and growing new revenue streams. So improving the business climate. This is a classic. This is something that every economic development person is going to bring forward to you because reputation means everything. And if we do not have the open for business sign up in Davis, then we will not be attracting new business. So it is almost like the first step. And it's really about creating the conditions where businesses want to operate, they want to work, and where more money circulates locally. It's that first ignition to that engine of economic development, and this is the natural process. I'm not nudging anything along, I'm not trying to close gaps, I'm just doing what we do and doing it better with that in mind, that I'm trying to create a good reputation for the city. That continues on as we talk about things like business attraction. So we grow the community, and growth doesn't have to be scary. We can grow in a way that makes sense. We're filling in vacant spaces. We're filling in the density that's contemplated in the downtown specific plan. We're taking office buildings that maybe were underutilized by a tenant that is working, has most of their clientele working remotely. We put a business in there that has people working in the building, so everybody gets those multiplier effects of, shopping in the city. And it also helps us find the right suppliers, startups, talent investors. I've been talking to some of the larger companies here in town. They would love to see an economic development strategy that takes into consideration their warehousing needs. And we're not talking big warehouses. We're just talking their basic, where do I buy my printer cartridges? Where do I store my equipment? Where can I have my trucks load and unload? These are the kinds of things that create a nucleus of activity. And we're missing some of that because we don't have an economic development strategy that helps create that reinforcing cycle of growth. Business retention and expansion activities, these are for our homegrowns, these are for our locals, these are people that have been here. We want to make them feel supported, cared after. This is the business outreach component of what we do. And this is part of them going and talking to their friends and saying, Davis is a great place to do business. I have a great connection at the city who can answer your questions. You should come and talk to them. And this is about us participating in the community development process. We get the feedback that we need from our local businesses through people like Carrie and Brett to understand what's not working in City Hall and what can we do better to serve our existing businesses. And this creates a positive reputation for the city. This is a nice, easy one to do if you can figure out how to do it, because you can usually start to see return on investment in 18 months. If we have an approved project that Sherry has approved, that's ready to go, and they're running into an issue satisfying one particular condition of approval, or they're running into an issue because their bank doesn't understand how Davis is TOD everywhere. It's transit-oriented development everywhere because we have great transit system, we have great bike system. Sometimes just putting their lender on the phone with me and explaining, hey, why don't you come to Davis? We'll walk you around. Let's send you some bike maps so you can really understand. When we say you don't need parking for this multifamily project, you really don't need parking, because from a financing perspective, you're going to get tenants. You don't have to worry about your performance not working because you just don't understand part of the Davis culture. So this can be something that we could set a target for. So let's say Sherry has a dozen that are sitting there that are not moving forward. Maybe I say, in the next 18 months, I'm going to meet with all of them, and I'm going to attempt to unlock 3 of them. That would be an economic development objective that you could measure and see and say, okay, in 18 months, did Katie do that? Did she meet with all of them? Did she unlock 3 of them? And this leads to public-private partnerships. Public-private partnerships are this large umbrella. They can be formal, they can be informal, and they really are just leveraging the opportunities that the private investor brings for public benefit. We can share risk, we can share resources, we can share the development obligations and responsibilities, but ultimately at the end of the day, it's that partnership that tips us from a project not existing to a project existing that gets us access to new revenue, new jobs, new business-to-business sales tax, and also can help us on the cost end, right? If we structure it well enough that we're leveraging this private investment for a public benefit, maybe we take a cost out of our CIP in exchange for that. So this is not just a financing tool, this is really an important lever in that relationship building that you've seen touched on in the previous slides. Small business investment and workforce development investment, these have statistically the highest yield. These are the easiest things to sort of estimate because there are lots of economic fiscal impact models that talk about how these things work, and you typically are able to articulate them in the terms of like multiplier effect. I invested $1 in workforce development and we saw $3 worth of return in increased activity, increased business location, people starting up new businesses, etc. So these aren't just nice to do for the community. These are really about driving some of these very basic activities that grow the tax base and expand economic activity throughout the city. And that ties nicely into entrepreneurship development. These are your big risk takers. They have low costs, big ideas, they need to be supported, they need to connect with, and this is our best opportunity to connect with the university. This allows tech transfer to come from the university. So as we are supporting entrepreneurship development, it's not particularly something that you can be like, oh, I'm gonna grow the next Microsoft or Google, but you have the potential to. And so it may take, this is the longest lead time, this may take you 20 years to see the results on, but you can do things in a 3 or 5 year horizon. You can invest in a loan in Inventopia, which is what this city did in 2020. And we did an economic impact report, and we saw for every dollar that the city invested in Inventopia, we got $2.3 back in direct investment. The number was closer to $10 back in indirect investment. So we saw a direct return on investment for just supporting our local incubator in entrepreneurship development. Now this is another one. You invest in your downtown. And I don't mean invest in the cleanliness, although that is very, very important. I mean invest in the offsites that change the public landscape, the public realm. So if you think about how you experience downtown, there's two parts of it. There's the private space. Those are your restaurants, your shops, maybe even your apartments or your hotels that you're going into. And then there's the public space. And the public space really does inform what's happening in the private space. And you can invest in that, set the stage. It's sort of the front door to many of these businesses. And when you invest in it, you're gonna get people to invest right back. And this isn't like, we're not looking to estimate causality, this is just human nature. I see a prettier street, I have a nicer street, I may improve my frontage. If I improve my frontage, maybe I, am able to attract some more business. If I attract more business, maybe I'm able to hire another person. So this is that sort of like slow multiplier effect that we see occurring when we invest in the public realm, and eventually all of those activities, when you combine them together, result in increased revenue to the city in property tax and sales tax. Then I mentioned earlier that in the vision, the city of Davis is identified being a regional player. But that was referenced in the terms of being a leader, and I think being a leader is really important, but being a partner is just as important as well too. And one of the advantages of a regional partnership is that we get to do more than we could do with just me. I get to reach out to Valley Vision in Greater Sacramento. These are regional economic development entities, and they help me figure out what's my return on investment. For example, Greater Sacramento is the one that ran that economic impact analysis on Inventopia for us, and that was included as part of the charges that we pay for our subscription. So we reach out to brokers, we have these same conversations, we learn about somebody coming in to the market, they're looking for a place to go, we connect them with the developer who has land that maybe has been sitting there for a while, that land transacts, and we see an increase in the property tax on the assessment because it's transacted, and last time it transacted was before Prop 13. So these are the kinds of activities when we open up our doors and have these regional partnerships, we're able to make those connections that allow us to kind of usher those investors in and increase the visibility and the prominency. And it helps us too in our relationship with UC Davis, because UC Davis is a regional entity and we're plugged into what it's doing as a regional economic engine. And marketing. Everybody thinks marketing is sort of a nice to have, but in an economic development strategy, it's absolutely a need to have. It's part of the DNA of what we do. We need it in order to attract new businesses. We need it to get people to invest in the time that it takes to put in public-private partnerships. We need it so that our regional players know what we're about, what we have to offer. And so this combined will translate into raising more revenue. And this is also includes things like a shop local campaign. This includes tourism, which you can say, okay, I get it, that's TOT, that's direct TOT that's coming into the city. So marketing covers a lot of the objectives that I had listed. I want to just kind of give a quick overview. It's not really something that you sort of like tack on at the end. You be intentional about your marketing so you can put out what you all know about this community and share it with the rest of the people that we're looking to have come and enjoy what Davis has to offer. So that's it. That was a lot of information, I understand, but I really wanted to guys give you an overview on what it means to do what I do, economic development planning, how it fits in this strategic plan that's coming in front of the city council, and how it fits into your mission, which is to make sure that the city is acting in fiscally responsible ways, and how economic development, although it is not a cure-all, definitely fits into the idea that you can address budget shortfalls by engaging in intentional activities in the marketplace to close gaps, to find new opportunities, and to really highlight what Davis does well and improve upon the things that are maybe getting in the way of Davis doing things exceptional. So that's the rest of my presentation. You'll be seeing it again on March 3rd when I go in front of the City Council in more detail, but you got a nice preview of it this evening. So with that, I'm going to hand it back over to the chair and ask if there's any questions. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much. That was an awesome presentation. Really appreciate it. Absolutely. I think we'll start first with just any clarifying questions, and then we'll go to public comment before we do like the meaty discussion. So, yeah. Go ahead.
My question is about the strategic plan. So on March 3rd, will you be presenting a draft of the strategic plan, or what does that planning process look like, and how will we be involved?
I can't answer the second question. I don't know how you will be involved. I apologize. This slide got updated today because I was informed that I was going on March 3rd with the strategic plan by my city manager, which I'm excited about, don't get me wrong. But I believe what his expectation is that I am taking the document forward for council consideration. Whether the council decides to turn that into a workshop and they have ideas they want to share with me and I come back for approval, I can't say. I don't know what they're going to want to do with the information once it's presented to them.
And I guess I would, to answer the second question, if the commission has suggestions, thoughts, questions, things that you think should be clarified, should be in the plan, out of the plan, any comments that you might have, we welcome those this evening, and Katie can take those and figure out how she can incorporate either those comments into the plan, or perhaps those are just questions that then go forward to the council, things for them to think about.
Any other clarifying questions? Okay, well then, is there any public comment on this item?
Sure. Thank you for allowing me to make a public comment. I'm Brett. I'm the Executive Director of the Davis Downtown Business Association. I just wanted to say I really appreciate the city having Katie on staff. I've been involved with things related to the city for a decent amount of time, and it's very important to have a professional in the economic development field. And I feel very fortunate that Katie is on staff. She had mentioned the idea of team, and I feel that, I won't speak on behalf of Carrie, but with the chamber and ourselves, we feel like we're a partner, and Katie is open to our ideas and suggestions. I think it is important to have a coherent and comprehensive plan. I think sometimes, we sort of chase shiny objects, and it's sort of a disjointed, haphazard approach. And so I'm very encouraged by this presentation, and we'll be there on March 3rd, and hopefully the City Council gives Katie the the support in order to allow her to pursue developing a cohesive, comprehensive plan. But I wanted to thank you and Katie specifically for this opportunity. So thank you.
If there's no other public comments, I'll open up to discussion, questions.
Yes.
Sure. Okay, Mike's pausing. Thank you. This is an excellent presentation. I understood it. I think what's in there is very good. So my comment about it is that the focus is very much on traditional city businesses, which is not a bad thing, but the sort of Chamber of Commerce downtown businesses. And I wanted to ask about some of the businesses that are important, particularly to Davis. So one of them is the biggest business in town, which is the university. And I wanted to ask what the interface is like between the city and the university to find ways to work together on economic development. It's very much in the university's interest to have Davis be healthy and strong. It helps them recruit professors, it helps them get students. So how does the city interface with them? And as I'm thinking about that, I'm reflecting on 2nd Street, sort of between Davis, between downtown and Target, where there's so much development happening right now. And that seems directly tied, at least, I don't really know, but it seems like it's directly tied to the university being here and the engineering firms and tech firms that are growing there. Sort of asking, how did that happen? How is that happening? And what is the city doing to support those kind of tech businesses, which I imagine are just very helpful for the city bottom line to encourage. The other type of business I wanted to ask about was agriculture. Because of course, the university is an ag school. And when you think about town, we started as a train station for agriculture to, ship their produce. The cannery was actually a cannery. And still any direction you go, it's sunflowers, it's almonds, it's tomatoes. So very little of that agriculture happens in the city limits, I imagine. But I'm sure we're still very much a hub for agriculture. What are we doing to interface with the orchard owners, the farmers, the agricultural businesses to help grow our economy?
Your response back? So the economic development objectives include those types of businesses. What you're not seeing this evening, because it really wasn't tied to this sort of notion of like, what can we do to grow the property tax and sales tax base, is we brought forward to the City Council in September a market analysis where Greater Sacramento thought that the City of Davis had strategic advantaged industry clusters. And so the ones that you mentioned, the tech sectors, the ones that are coming out of the university, the ag tech, those were all listed as ones that if we're going to develop an incentive program for, if we're going to do a targeted business attraction activities, we're going to be targeting those particular industries because they reflect where we are likely to be able not only to offer all of the talent that comes at the university, but the ability for those businesses to connect to the other businesses that are in Davis that are doing the same thing. Businesses love to come together. They sort of like to flock. And so having Greater Sacramento sort of say, these are your 4 or 5 industry sectors that are really tied closely to the university, that's if you were going to put together a business attraction strategy or an entrepreneurship development strategy, this is what you would want to focus on. So what didn't get presented this evening is these economic development objectives. We said there were policies. You likely would have policies that talk about these competitive advantages, these targeted industries, saying these are where we could probably get the biggest bang for our buck, to use that expression. So that would be a policy that I would write, that I have sort of written, but I'm still working on it, that I would write and say, then these objectives have to live with us. So when I'm saying business attraction, I'm doing it under the umbrella of these 4 or 5 particular targeted industries that in many cases have a very strong tie to the university. And then specific to your question about how we're partnering with the university. So I do reach out to the people that run their Venture Catalyst organization, which is one of their internal university entities that is focused on tech transfer and growing startups. The same challenges that a city would have with growing startups, the same challenges that they have. And so while I don't know that we're going to be able to come up with the magic solution, we do cross-pollinate and try to work together to understand that that incubator that I mentioned, UC Davis is required to have a partnership with them, and they're required to have UC Davis be a member on their board. I'm a non-voting member on their board. So we go to board meetings together and we talk about issues like, what are some of the challenges that you're running into with your startups? Where are your angel investors coming from? I'm going to the World Ag Tech Summit in San Francisco with Greater Sacramento, and the university will be there as part of the delegation. So we do interact in that regional economic development initiative objective that I mentioned to support those other objectives like business retention, business expansion, and entrepreneurship development.
Yeah, I had a few. Thanks for coming.
Sure.
I'm curious, can you give us a preview of what feedback you received about what changes business want to see in Davis? I know you mentioned more warehousing space, but are there other things that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Curious if you can.
Yeah, so they
elaborate.
fall typically, most of them fall under that community development pillar that I mentioned, and that would be what I have my community development folks here with me. They share in the pain. We probably need to go through a major update with our general plan to simplify our zoning, to make it possible for businesses that want to expand or want to come here to really understand with their broker, what are my options? Because we have a very complex land use planning structure here. We have over 250 planning documents that dictate zoning. That's okay. We've got very qualified staff to do it. But if we could cut that in half, we could make it 25 instead. We might have an easier time getting people to understand where can I go, where can I expand, how would I need to structure my business. It also makes it easier for the banks to finance things because instead of sending them an 8-page document, they send a 1-page zoning form that says you comply, which they do. They're great. I work with them every single day to find the fastest way to get the businesses that want to come here their answers. But those are things that really fall into that community development that we hear from businesses all the time. And a big part of what I do on the unplanned part of my work plan is helping those businesses that reach out and say, I have an issue. I don't know how to navigate this particular issue, or I'm having trouble getting this permit, or ABC is not, my other one is ABC is not returning my phone call, and it's taking 6 months for them to approve my patio license. Do you know anybody? And I go, yeah, I do. And we make a phone call, and Chief Henry and I call them and have a conversation and say, please, can you expedite this process? So those are some of the things that we would like to work with, not only in our own agency, but with other agencies so that they are as business friendly to Davis businesses as possible.
I just had a couple others.
Sure.
You know, I didn't know about that loan that you mentioned that the city made back in 2020.
We made two loans actually. We made a
Oh,
loan
two
in
loans.
2020, and then we made a loan again in April of last year for $185,000 for them to expand their business and work with Greater Sacramento on, and the university
Oh, cool.
on attracting new startups.
Are there like lots more opportunities about that? I just wonder why that, if it was so successful, like why hasn't it been repeated?
To do incubators? Or
Yeah, or
yeah, so there are
more of
incubators. Yeah, there are incubators throughout the region. Woodland has one called Ag Start. Roseville has one called Growth Factory. They are this supportive mesh network that supports startups. What's unique about Davis is that you have the ability to interface with really qualified and really inexpensive interns that are more than happy to come work as part of their school credits, which you don't really get in any other place here. And so businesses who grow in our local incubators like to stay here because they like to continue to stay tapped into that talent pool. And there was a question I forgot to answer, which is about the small businesses, the engineering groups, and those kinds of businesses that are happening here. That's also very unique to Davis. So many people coming through their school year, they get their PhDs, they get their master's degrees, they start their own business, they hang out their shingle. I'm an engineer, I'm an architect, I hydro, whatever I do, one was I talked to recently, aquatic ecotoxologist was a new word that I learned recently. They do fish stuff, and they hang up a shingle, and then they're really beneficial because what I like to do is reach out to the larger engineering firms in the region and say, hey, did you know we have a specialist in that? You should hire them as a sub. So we work with the Regional Small Business Institute Center to do that kind of stuff.
It sounds like you, if I'm hearing you right, you see a lot of opportunity or sort of traction that we have here to really contribute to a lot of business formation. Is that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Maybe untapped opportunity to.
And untapped no longer. The chamber now offers small business administration office hours. Thank you, Carrie. Which wasn't happening. So we didn't have a place for people to come in and ask their questions about how to start their small businesses, how to write their business plan, how to get funding. And then one of the things Carrie and I partnered on was asking her if she could offer some space. And Carrie's amazing. She just went off and did it. And now somebody's there. What is it? Every third Thursday?
Every third Tuesday from 10
Every
to 2.
third Tuesday from 10 to 2.
That's awesome. Just last one for me. I'm curious, not asking for like predictions or numbers to really like hang our hats on, but when you think about what's sort of the size of the prize for the city of Davis, however you want to frame that, whether it's revenue, local GDP, all right, I don't know what the right KPIs are, but what sort of numbers do you think about? Like single-digit millions of dollars, tens of millions?
I don't think of it as numbers. I think of it as a percentage over inflation. I look forward to having a conversation with the city council about what they would like the percentage over inflation to be to grow.
Of growth of what?
Of our property tax and sales tax base.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
So if I could say to them, for example, just some numbers, we have a $3 million structural deficit. Based on our current general fund, we probably need to grow. I think the numbers that I did last was 6% over inflation to catch up with that deficit. And then maybe we could grow 3% over inflation. 3% over inflation is really moderate growth. I mean, this is not double-digit growth here. This is really reasonable growth. But we have to understand what we're saying, right? We have to keep up with the costs. And then because we are always looking for opportunities to do more, give more, provide better public benefit, better services. We want to be more than just inflation to keep up with the growing demands of the city. We were having a discussion recently today, and it was like 20 years ago, cities didn't do social services, and now they do. That's a whole new program that we have to fund. And so that's why you look at these kind of numbers. What percentage over inflation are you looking to grow? Because we meet regularly with our sales tax and property tax consultants. They tell us how much we're growing without me doing any of this. So we can estimate how much more do we need to grow, and then we can look at, price, cost price index and figure out like where we need to be staying at. So I prefer that versus dollars because people can really understand when they say, okay, 3% doesn't sound like a lot. 3% over inflation means maybe we're 6%, 7%, depending upon price index. But if I tell you that naturally you're growing at 5%, that doesn't seem like such a big number to have to try to tackle. Or it doesn't feel quite so oppressive and suddenly you're losing the character of your community by having to grow that much. So that's my preferred metric we're talking about.
If we're growing 6% in excess of inflation, $3 million structural gap goes pretty fast.
And so those are the kinds of conversations that we want to have. Those are just rough numbers, please, Vanguard, don't write them and say that's what Katie says we're going to do. But I'm just giving to them as an example. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I have two questions. Thank you for the presentation. It was very helpful. First question is, you mentioned in your presentation visitors. What goals do we have or should we have on lowering visitors into Davis? And second question is, at our last meeting, we had a presentation that included a discussion about how cities are competing for the big gets, Amazon warehouses and Costco's and Walmarts and things like that. How does that fit into what we're trying to do here?
Okay. Can I answer them in opposite order that you asked? Would that be okay? So I want to go back to your economic development vision, the city's economic development vision, my North Star. I don't read anything in here that says that the big gets fit the economic vision. Nor do I really read anything in here that said they fit the goals. They may, there may be examples. I think Target is probably a really good example. Nugget Markets are good examples. There may be ones that fit, but that's not what the strategy is about. The strategy isn't about sort of shoehorning in the next big offer that's coming through. You have me here because I'm supposed to be filtering these things through. I'm meant to curate, I'm meant to be intentional, and so it's not about sort of looking for those big gets, because the reason why I walked you through the economic development planning flowchart was because it all starts with what are your aspirations for the future? What are the goals you're laying out for me? And then I get to the objectives part, where I have to figure out sort of these 3, 4, 5-year work plans for doing those things. And so if it's not authentic to the goals and vision, it's not going to be part of the objective. And that's intentional. That's why we structure these things this way. In terms of the visitors' goals, that's a great question. And what I would say to you is that it really kind of depends on the feedback that I get. I want to get back to my questions, sorry. Get back from the city council. Visitors are a population that needs to be defined, just like workers needs to be defined in the economic development strategic plan. The vision statements that we have don't really lend themselves to that definition. So writing some policies that define those groups will be essential to structuring the activities that are associated with them. So for example, I might say, you can say, have a service population, visitors to the downtown, and be very specific about who the visitors are to the downtown. You could also write one that's very specific to visitors to the hotels. And they may have, and visitors that come to your downtown are very different than visitors that stay overnight in your hotels. And so you might use different strategies. You might have different partners. You might have different time frames. You might have different growth projections that you're doing. So you do need to define those. And I'm still working on them. And I look forward to the council feedback and the subcommittee's feedback on what they consider those service populations to be. And that will help inform sort of what is the correct strategy for going after them and what's the correct amount of growth. Because we do have, like, Visit Davis is a visitors bureau here. They do know roughly how many visitors we get. We can go talk to the hoteliers and ask them, what's your vacancy rate like? And if it turns out, and this is the part that I find interesting, it turns out they don't have a lot of vacancy. That would be a waste of my time going after visitors that stay in the hotels, because there is no place for them to go. That would be wasted effort, right? Like, there's no more TOT for me to go get. So instead I would say, okay, I'm gonna go get another hotel here. And then I'm gonna go after visitors, because I'm gonna go and find that additional new TOT revenue stream. So it kind of depends on understanding what your baseline is. So I hope to bring that information forward with the resources that I have, which are a little anecdotal at this point right now, and say, you know, I personally don't think that we have a big issue with our hotel vacancy. I'm not hearing that being an issue. What I am hearing is that there's not enough meeting space. And the hotels need meeting space in order to get the book outs that they're looking for long term. And that's what they want. They want to know that their rooms are filled in every single month for a big chunk of time because it's tied to a conference or a wedding or some other event. And that they're not having. And that's what I'd like to give them. I'd like to give them something that is not tied to the university, but is instead tied to the economic activity of Davis, which are these conferences. So those are the conversations I'm having with hoteliers.
I'd just like to echo what everyone else has said. Really helpful presentation, lots of great information. I was really interested to hear about some of the tech and ag business efforts to bring in more businesses that are doing that kind of work. I'm also curious what you're thinking about restaurants and retail, particularly in downtown. I would imagine that's a different strategy. But that's one of the things that I hear a lot from the community is a lot of concern around empty storefronts downtown.
And downtown has some great opportunities, but it also has some weaknesses that we have to figure out how to navigate as well. It is older, the buildings are older in many cases, they need some rehab, they need some retrofit. And so we're working on some strategies for how we can encourage those activities to occur where we have investment occurring. What we do have control over is not the investment that happens in the private realm, but in the public realm. And I am working with a consultant right now, putting together the game plan for forming one of those tax increment financing districts that I mentioned. It won't form it, but it will inform us what we need to do to consider that as an avenue for the city to go after that type of financing. And when I have it done, I promise I'll come back and talk about it. But I'm working on that right now. She should be done sometime in the summertime with sort of that game plan for everything that needs to occur to invest in the public realm. So it's a little bit of a working with Brett and working with businesses. I go to every single one of their board meetings, try to hear the issues that they're dealing with, understand how I can alleviate things from the community development side if they're running into issues with their building permits or they're running into issues with code enforcement. Many of them have my cell phone number, they text me, they tell me about things, they send me pictures when things aren't working. We try to alleviate those as quickly as possible. I don't know that I have a fix for the vacancies yet in the downtown. I'll be frank, it's a difficult nut to crack. And so we are looking at things that we can influence. And we can influence the hoteliers that are in the downtown and see if we can get them to be making some investments in their hotels to attract additional visitors when there are vacancies. We are working with the chamber and the DDBM that's trying to attract people into the downtown, working closely with our public works staff and our park staff, trying to find opportunities for efficiencies in the cleanliness area. But in terms of just how do you get a landlord who isn't paying attention to their building to pay attention to their building, there are some strategies well too, but they aren't revenue generating, which is part of the reason why I'm not talking about them with you this evening. They are enforcement related. They are activities that are related to beautification. And again, not under this commission's purview exactly, but they are going to be included in the plan. They're a little more challenging and a little more nuanced. And do require even more than a community development approach, more of a, what are the nuisance and detractors from the downtown, and can we eliminate those barriers to investment? And those are really, that's kind of where the other life of economic development lives, or what are the things that are preventing investment and can I remove them? I think primarily our strategies for the downtown are those things.
Just a clarification question. The tax incrementing finance district would be specifically to update some of those old buildings? Is that?
It would be to invest in the public realm, which is consistent with the proposed economic development objective.
Okay, but sorry, can you just tell me specifically, that includes business or building upgrades?
It does not.
It does not, so it's just public spaces?
It is just public space. As I said, and I'll clarify it again, we have very limited tools to compel private investment. And when I say compel, I mean force private investment. We have code enforcement, which is one. But this is where we have to respect market decisions, and it's frustrating, I know. But yeah, I can't force someone to put public dollars in their building, but I can put public dollars in the public realm and maybe compel them or incentivize them or entice them to put in private investment.
One more question. Apart from cost, what do you see as the biggest things holding us back? And I separate cost because we all understand it's cheaper to set up in Dixon or Winters or Woodland, and some of the reasons why. But other than that, what are the biggest obstacles Davis faces that you'd love to see us work to remove?
So I would like to not dismiss cost, if that's okay. Because cost is a function of time, and we can work on time. Time is the time it takes to process your application, to get responses from staff, to get a clear answer, to get your plan check back. And I respect the heck out of my colleagues. I don't want to make it sound like I think they're doing a terrible job. They do a great job. They do an amazing job. But still, we can translate the time it takes for those things into cost. And so if we can find ways to streamline our permitting, if we can find ways to make permits online, if we can find ways to take payments online that otherwise we're taking over the counter. These are all things that we can translate into a reduction in cost. Uncertainty. Will I get my zoning approved? How much am I going to invest with my broker looking for things? How, is this a good fit? Should I build a business plan around this building? But I don't have a clear answer on my zoning. Uncertainty leads to cost. So when you say it's cheaper, yeah, maybe construction, like the actual cost of land is cheaper. That is true. But one of the things that you can control is how much it costs the developer to process something. How much does it cost them to make a decision? How much does their bank get delayed and then their interest rate takes up a point in the process? So we can control some of those things. I don't want to eliminate that cost is really important. Can you ask your question one more time so I can make sure I address it fully?
Other than that, what's holding us back? What are the biggest obstacles you'd like to see us remove?
Oh, I do think that the regional initiatives, participating greater in the regional initiatives, is definitely holding us back. I think that letting people know that we want business here and letting people know that there is an avenue to get access to someone like myself or Sherry or Dara or Brett or Carrie, and letting them know, hey, listen, we can connect you. We have a network that you can come belong in. This came up in the recent business traction that I was doing, where they said, in my previous jurisdiction, I had access to this network. Do you have a similar network? And I was like, yes, we do. We're developing it. Let me put you in contact with these people. And so those kinds of things we do here, but I don't think we advertise it well. So marketing the city better, marketing the services that we provide better, marketing our competitive advantages better, 100% would be shining a light on things that we've kind of let stay in the dark as a community. Because it served us, and I think now it serves us to shine the light on what we do well here and why people would enjoy taking advantage of those things.
So I guess I just have a question. I think there's a lot of stuff that you put in here, so thank you. And so in terms of starting a business, there's a lot of support, it sounds like, for someone that can, get support creating a business plan and maybe, I mean, I'm not entirely sure what all of those things are, but it seems like, there's a lot of support there. And then once people are past that phase and they're trying, does that support include sort of the permitting piece, or is it?
Yeah, so I have businesses that reach out to me all the time and say, I'm interested in starting a coffee shop, for example. Mm-hmm. And I'll send them, and I have sort of an email that I've drafted over the years, and I brought a copy of it with me from my former jurisdiction because it just had so many good resources in it. But it's like a 10-step process, and I tell them, okay, you plug into your business license and me at this step, and you plug into your permitting process and me at this step, so that they know that when they're supposed to be talking to the Small Business Administration, when they're supposed to be talking to their bank, when they can reach out and ask these various different nonprofits for help in putting together their business plan. So there is definitely a support system for those big businesses that are just starting out. They have an idea, but they don't really know how to go about doing that. There is also support, and some jurisdictions decide to intentionally support small businesses that are already up and running. Minority-owned business, women-owned businesses, businesses that are owned by people who fit a certain demographic in a disadvantaged community. There are what they call small business accelerator programs, where you take that small business and you train them up and give them access to resources and mentors in their particular fields. Or you give them outright capital, or you make a small business loan to them. And you can do that. Now, I'm concerned about the city of Davis taking that on, since I am a person of one, and that's a lot of work for one person to do. But in the future, if economic development grows here, we're successful in sort of rolling out this next 2.0 of economic development here, that's definitely something that could be on the horizon for the city if they wanted to do that, especially since they're so invested in their startups that come out of here. That would be a natural next level activity for them to do. But I think that is definitely a running, and we're still walking in terms of our economic development objectives.
I guess I was just trying to figure out, what are these areas of friction, and if it's their support in these areas, is it that
maybe there needs to be more investment in terms of just like getting some sort of system that puts things online that can make things simpler for folks, or is
Yeah,
I'm just curious about like where there are opportunities to even just, I mean, some things you probably have to make an investment for in order to achieve some of these. So it's like, where is it that the city
Yeah.
could use that
Yeah, I mean, the state-
investment to support people?
Yeah, the state has a lot of resources, and like that regional small business group that I mentioned, they reached out to me. And they reached out to me because the person who runs it happens to know me frankly, from Girl Scouts. And reached out to me, and she's like, I'd like to talk to you about making sure that we can, to figure out a way to get into Davis. So when I was saying earlier, like there are people that are hungry to bring those kind of resources here to Davis, but they were not sure who to talk to. And they weren't sure how to fit it into a larger initiative. And so I think to answer your question as succinctly as I can, yes, there are resources to assist those businesses that want to grow. Have we had our receptors out to receive them as a city to then transfer them to our community? Probably not as well as we could, and certainly not as well as I hope we will after we have an economic development strategic plan in place.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Sure. I had a couple questions. First, thank you again for the presentation. It was wonderful. You mentioned in one of the slides about like addressing unmet needs of the community and business needs. I'm curious how that data is gathered. Like, how do you like figure out where the unmet business and community needs?
So Carrie's in the audience, and we have been talking about doing a business needs assessment. The chamber is going to be taking the lead on that, and I'm going to be offering support in any and all ways that I can, and opening up my contacts. She'll be opening up their contacts so we can go and get a really good, strong understanding of what the business needs are from the community. And I mean, we are receptive. We have open ears. Brett, Carrie, I all have open ears. Every conversation, we kind of walk away going, okay, that was a new piece of information. I need to figure out how to fit that in. But this needs assessment that the chamber is talking about undertaking is one that will be much more systemic, and we'll be looking for those trends that will have the greatest impact across multiple business sectors.
Thank you. You also talked about, you had a slide about like unlocking stalled residential
Yes.
and commercial projects.
Yeah.
And you may have touched on this already with like the permits and the zoning, but can you go into sort of like what are the causes of the stalling? I guess.
Yeah, can I ask if Sherry would like, Sherry, do you want to comment on that? Would that be okay if I asked her? Would it be all right? I don't know if the Director of Community Development came up, because we tag team these a lot, and it would probably be good to hear from both of us, if that's okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I knew you would need to be here for a reason. This is Sherry Metzger, Director of Community Development.
Katie and I are joined at the hip. So the question was, what did we find typically stalling?
Yeah, there was a slide about like how like a really important way to develop the economy in Davis is to unlock a lot of these like stalled residential and commercial projects.
Yeah. Okay. Well, today, and there are as many reasons as you can think of why projects stall out. But the primary reason in today's economy is the cost of money. And I've got a number of projects that we have approved over the course of the last, I would say, 2 or 3 years that can't get out of the ground because they can't get funding. And I've said this to many decision makers over the years that, you know, we can come up with the most ideal plan and approve all the projects, but if they can't get funding from the bank, it's not going to happen. And that's the disappointing part of planning, is that we live in a capitalist community, in a capitalist nation, and we rely on capitalism to build and execute our plans. We don't build anything, we just approve it. So right now, I've got probably close to a dozen residential projects sitting on the floor over there in community development, plan checked, but they're not picking up their permits because they can't get money to build the project. And we don't have money for them to build the project, so it's about trying to find other ways that we can do that. Now, there have been many other times when it wasn't a money situation. Maybe they've hired a not very good consultant to help them. And we've had to pull the owner in and say, look, you know, this isn't going very well and you need to do something about your situation to make it go better. Oftentimes we have to prove to them that that's what's really happening. As I've said probably 100 times to Dara, it's real easy for an applicant to throw the city under the bus and say, oh, the city's just taking too long. But it isn't always the case.
And then I'll go ahead and riff off what Sherry just said, if that's okay, to what I can do to help with that, since, so let's say it's financing, for example. They may have a pro forma that doesn't have a particularly favorable cap rate, that's the profit that they're going to make. So bank looks at that, goes, I'm concerned that you don't have a margin of error. But we look at their offsites, for example. We called Ryan Chapman in, the Director of Public Works, Engineering and Transportation. We go, we noticed that you were gonna be upgrading this water main in 5 years. And that happens to be the water main that they need upgraded. Is there any way we could move things around and you could upgrade it for them? And it's gonna happen anyway. It's in the CIP. We were already planning on doing it. It has public benefit, it needed to be done. This is not a real example, I'm just giving it to you as an example. And Ryan says, yeah, let's see if we can move it around. If we let the developer know, hey, listen, we're gonna try to see if we can move that CIP around. And then that can be reflected as a cost savings in their pro forma. And maybe in a year's time, when that CIP gets up and running, they go to the bank and they say, look, this cost has come out because now the city's handling that offsite for me. And all it took was us just moving it around in our time frame to do that. Another example that is a little more site specific, I'm using a real world example from Davis here, so I'm going to be not quite on the nose. But we had a developer who needed access to a certain resource. And there was a member of the private sector who had that resource. And I called him up and said, would you be interested in leasing this resource to that resource so that they could work together? And they said, sure. So everybody made money, and the issue that the bank had went away. So those are examples of what we can do to help move things along that are totally within our control. We haven't expended any resources that we weren't going to already expend. We haven't done anything that triggers prevailing wage, but we have alleviated some pressure in the project's pro forma that allows it to go from a no-go to, yeah, the bank will fund it.
Another example, and then I will promise we'll stop because we can probably go all night. Just down the street, when the Commons was under construction.
Oh, yeah.
My whole staff was on board. We were working very hard to stay on time and on target with getting all the building permits issued, getting inspections done in a timely manner, all the kind of things that we have control over. And then one day they called us up and said, we have a problem. And I said, what did we do? And the answer was, you didn't do anything. PG&E won't give us power. I said, what? And they told me the whole story, and I said, okay, let me get on it, we'll figure out what we can do. So I went to Katie, we talked about it, I'll let you tell the good news.
I made some phone calls and it happened.
That's the kind of
Again,
thing.
I'm not going to get into too much detail. I made some phone calls and it happened. So these are when we have good partnerships, strong partnerships, partnerships that are mutually beneficial, and we have trust in our developers and in our other agency partnerships. We're able to have conversations that need to be had sometimes to unlock opportunities that otherwise may be delayed. They're still available to the general public. We're not doing anything that's magic or secret here. I don't have a sorting hat or a magic wand that's making things happen. But I do have someone's number, and I've worked with them for 20 years. And so when I call them and I say, can you please look into this application and tell me, is it stuck with your team or is it stuck with their team? And the 2 times that I followed up on this, one was stuck with the PG&E team and one was stuck with Brixmor. And so on both times, we called Brixmor and said, hey, the problem's with you guys. You need to go do this. You're not responding to this foreman's comments. And if you don't respond, it's gonna get put in the bottom of the queue. And they said, oh my God, thank you so much. We didn't realize that. And the other time, it was the foreman was asking for something that Sherry had already provided. And so we were like, why are you asking for it again? Here's the email that it came on. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. Let me move it to the top of the heap. And so sometimes it's just those kinds of little attention that tip things from not moving to moving.
And I think for me and for Katie both, we both come from different cities, but cities with similar kind of overall thought pattern, and that is even from the top down. We all have to kind of be, as she likes to say, rowing in the same direction.
It's a team sport.
And it's very important that everybody is thinking and responding in the same manner, because we're all trying to get to the same objective. I'm not going to do her job anymore.
Thank you for coming up, Sherry.
Thank you. So it sounds like it's a lot of it is things that we can't control, like cost of money, and then beyond that, it's like problem solving, like project management for each individual.
Yeah, or sometimes it's like value engineering. You tell them, another example on this jurisdiction, they were having a real problem with something in the performer related to their foundation. And I said, if you look at this foundation just got recently improved. It's a different type of foundation. Did you go look at that? And they were like, oh, no, we didn't know that there was anybody in the region. Their building inspector person got in touch with their other building, Roseville's building inspection person, and they went, oh, this could actually work here. That was $300,000 off their performer right there. So those are the kinds of things that we do. That's, in simplest terms, customer service.
Okay.
And that's sometimes customer service is just what you have to do. You have to go a little above and beyond for the intention of unlocking those projects.
Thank you. I have two more really quick questions. You also talked about, you had a slide about like our capacity for grants, grant capacity.
Yeah.
We had an update earlier that we're moving on updating our ACFRs. Once those are updated, does that unlock any more capacity for grants, or does that any significant change to?
Very possible. The reason why I included it was as an example of what is not an economic development policy. So I keep track of those kinds of things because I'm looking for those leverage points that I talked about. Oh, look at that, you got a grant, we can accelerate this and how this project can go forward. But that is the extent of how I pay attention to grants, unless I'm going after specific economic development related grants. Kelly, you want to take a shot?
My not so graceful return to my seat there. When we don't have updated financials, then there are grant opportunities that we're unable to apply for because it requires that we have updated financials. So it does not help us, and it's it's one of the biggest issues that we're desperately trying to get the catch up finished. So.
Thank you. And my last question is, you mentioned the fact that zoning sort of laws in Davis are complicated and the land planning documents are very complex. What is the path of simplifying that? Is that like a strategic plan change, or is there like municipal laws that have to be amended? Like, I guess I don't understand how that gets simplified.
I need to bring one of my friends back up and say, is that okay?
Don't worry, Cal.
Chairwoman, is that all right? Thank you.
Yeah, of course, yes. Thank you.
In the last city, we always spoke.
I know.
I'm used to that. It's not a simple process. That's a short answer. We do have to go through a whole formal amendment process and get the zoning codes changed. And that's basically a two-step process. We go to the Planning Commission first. We have a formal public hearing, and then we go to City Council, and we have another formal public hearing. And so there's just the general time that it takes to go through that. We also have to work with the city attorney's office to make sure what we're doing is current with state law and all those kinds of things. So there are costs, if you will, associated with performing those tasks. But in the long run, it should make things much easier and better for anybody who's doing any kind of development in the city of Davis. I've been with the city for about 7 years, a little more than 7 years, and in that time, we've amended the code at least 2 or 3 times, and I'm talking big omnibus kind of amendments where we take big chunks and try and make things work a little better and be clearer and be up to date with whatever the state requires. So it is something that we would have to work very closely with Kelly, or Katie, Dawn, and it's certainly something I advocate as well, because sometimes we find the code to be a little frustrating as well.
Would it start with you guys bringing it to the planning commission? Is that where it would germinate?
And usually, unless it was something that, like Katie's talking about putting in her strategic plan, that first place might actually be in a general discussion with the city council, where we say, hey, what do you think about us starting up this effort? Because there's a certain associated cost that goes with it. That's our time mostly, but it's still. And if they all kind of nod their heads and say, yeah, we think that's a reasonable use of your time, we want you to do that as part of your work plan, that might be one of the first places. But many times, you're right, the first time anybody knows that we're even doing it is when it shows up at the planning commission.
Thank you.
If I could also contribute to this discussion. It has occurred on the occasion where we have a business that is trying to come into town, and we've had to make some minor modifications to one particular zoning document. And so sometimes it's more of a trickle than it is a full wave of fixing something. And so one of the first projects that I did with my planner people was we had you've heard of them, Sierra, those folks that came. When we were trying to locate, attract businesses to that center, we were running into some issues with how the size dimensions and the requirements were. And so we went in and said, this is an impediment. This is that barrier thing that I was mentioning, where it's not really an activity that I'm proactive about, but we create the customer service network to be responsive to. And we said, look, this is someone's reached out to me, they want to come here, they have found a space, and we have run into a barrier of them being in this space. And so we just did a one-off. And so we try to be flexible with how we address those things. But yes, long-term, 5-year goal might be to have a much more robust overhaul, and a shorter-term goal would be to identify maybe other shopping centers, for example, that have large vacancies, or parts of the downtown that have large vacancies, and it's the zoning that's preventing us from, and we hear from brokers saying it's the zoning that's preventing us from finding tenants in there, and then we just go off and do that as a one-off to unlock that potential.
Thank you. Appreciate it. President Angela, you have a
Just ask a kind of two-part follow-up. You mentioned you're kind of an office of one right now. I'm curious, like how many people, like how many new staff you think you could put to work full-time? And if you got your number, would you have any sort of way of like demonstrating, tenfold ROI or whatever?
That's an awkward question to ask in front of my boss. And my boss's boss. I think it really is not up to me. I think what I'll say to you is this, is that the council will decide what those numbers are, and then I will let them know what it will take to do that. Ultimately, at the end of the day, they set, is my target here? Is my target here? Is my target here? And there is definitely recognition, I'm confident from my council, that they can't have a target here and then the resources be here. And they can't say, Katie, go grow it by 10%, but do it on your own. So I think that what we're going to be discussing, and I hope to be discussing in March 3rd, is that resource balance. I don't think that the economic development strategic plan is going to get into that because there's just too much other stuff to cover. We may need to come back with an action plan that does address those resources, that does address staffing needs, professional services needs, legal, poor Kelly and my legal fees, because it does take contracts to do some of these things, and it does take consultants to do these things. And so I think that we're going to be very measured. I'll answer that question there. We're going to be very measured in what we ask for. I cannot ask for something that contributes to the $3 million structural deficit while we are trying to get things up and running. So I am going to be a lean, mean fighting machine here and trying to do as much as I can with me as the only resource. And then if it becomes necessary, if the target requires more resources, then I think it will be a thoughtful conversation at the City Council.
Sounds like
If
It's
I
a
can
great
add to
question.
that, because you've read that, beautifully. One of the other things that we're always trying to do, because Katie cannot do this all by herself. She is one person and there are only so many hours in the day and so many days in the week. But where we can refocus or retarget existing staff, once we have some additional direction from council and more of an idea of how that would be best strategically done, that is something that we are looking at and considering. We know there are different levels within economic development. For example, just at a very basic level, just basic sort of administrative assistance could be super helpful to Katie when she's doing outreach to business communities, et cetera. And so trying to figure out how we can carve out time from existing, what we would call FTEs, full-time equivalents, and where we can get assistance is something that we're looking at. I will also note that Katie has made great use of interns from UC Davis and really been able to provide them with an excellent opportunity and excellent experience, but get in return some great research work and other activities completed. So we're trying to make the best with pretty scarce resources.
I want to follow up to that. It takes money to make money, and so that's just such a problem with a structural deficit, of course. Are there resources available, grant programs, loan programs from the state or the federal government that can help us to launch this work?
So the answer is yes. I think that issue that Kelly mentioned is still an impediment. We do need to be grant worthy to be able to go after those grants. So last year, the governor released the state economic blueprint, and that is a statewide economic strategic plan. And it relies upon regional economic strategic plans, which ours is called We Prosper Together, run by Valley Vision. That's an inclusive economic development strategy. If you're curious, I recommend they take a look at it. It was done really well with a lot of very technical and just general community input. It was done so well that the governor has been giving money to Valley Vision, they've been giving money to jurisdictions like ours and other entities and other partnerships, and those public-private partnerships and those agency partnerships that I talked about. I did attend one of the grant workshops just in consideration of submitting a potential proposal, and just learned that without an adopted economic development strategic plan, without an existing audit, we did not meet some of the minimum qualifications. So we're going to be working on those issues because those are really important. The second thing I would just say, and this is I like to think of economic development as an enterprise fund. I need to be out earning the money so I can spend the money. So as much as I can, I'm trying to show if I spent X, Y, and Z, this is what the return is going to be. So if you look at some of my staff reports, it's like, I recommend we sell this surplus land because some of the money that we're getting as proceeds from that sale can be used for economic development purposes. It can also go into the Housing Trust Fund, but also it's going to generate $36,000 in property taxes from the sale per annum, and maybe we could take, I don't know, $3,000 of it and put it into my legal budget. So some of my staff reports have these kind of tiny, little requests. I've also managed to take some of the relationships I have with UC Davis and be like, hey, you're working on, I don't know, clean energy. Can you throw a little economic development money my way and give me $20,000 to do an analysis on how grid inefficiencies are a deterrent in economic development? And so we've been coming in from as the sub-recipient route while we get our other items up to where they need to be the primary recipient of the grant. So we are being scrappy. I would not say that we are waiting for the council to give us money. In the meantime, I've been finding ways to act like an enterprise fund and go out and get money and leverage as many opportunities as possible to do the little bit that I can.
Any further discussion or questions? Michelle?
So just one thing for me, I guess, trying to think about how I can be useful in this conversation, but generally, I think as you're thinking about presenting these things, I think it could be helpful. I mean, I know that data is kind of an issue that you mentioned already, that a lot of it's anecdotal, but I think as there's any sort of data around like why there are vacancies, or, and maybe it's just, you kind of have the answers, but you know, I think kind of really firm data is helpful as it's presented further along. And also just what are those areas of friction for people trying to start businesses. I think you have financing is a big one that was mentioned, and so, but even if there are kind of statistics on like, you know, most of them it's financing, for a few of them it's something else. Maybe part of it is just if we invested more in like an online system or something, or what, you know, something technology related, then that would really streamline some, I don't know what it is, but I think having like data around some of these recommendations, and then also kind of like what are those resources that are needed to execute on different scenarios, I think would just create a discussion that's like a little more lively, I think, in future conversations with council or wherever that it might be. So it's just a recommendation.
Yeah, I guess in that same vein, is there, I don't think we have to take action on this, but like to respond to like the request for recommendations for the next presentation at council, how would commissioners feel about recommending to council to look into or to consider like directing staff to go to the planning commission with a recommendation to like simplify the zoning and the land use laws, because that sounds like that requires like forward movement to make any changes on. And to me, it just sounds like the kind of thing that is like a structural issue that's like from archaic laws that create problems going forward forevermore unless we make moves to change it. And it seems like it would reap benefits continuously going forward. Is there any, if we like make a motion to like recommend that, is there any appetite to support that amongst our commission?
My feedback is I would support whatever staff thinks is appropriate on that. If you're ready to have us recommend something, fantastic. If you want a little more time, let us know that. I agree with what Leslie said though. It seems like if an impediment is that our code is too complicated, then it's worth putting time into improving code.
If I may just add a thought here, and I'm looking also to staff to confirm if my memory is correct, but when we submitted our housing element to the state of California, if I recall, we committed to streamlining our permitting process as one of the action items that we would take. And that is certainly something that's very much on the table, and where the resources are is perhaps I don't know exactly at this moment.
The commission, if you're interested, you could say something along the lines of that you just believe that streamlining permitting processes, streamlining zoning would be beneficial to economic development, and share that sort of sentiment. Let the council figure out what they want to do with it. It's another option if you're not comfortable with the other action you suggested.
Okay, that sounds reasonable to me. I just want to make sure like we all agree before we like make a recommendation. It's not just a thought that I had.
Yeah, I would support that. I also, just as this process plays out, would love to have you back to the Fiscal Commission to talk about the strategic plan as it gets more fleshed out. So that would be a recommendation I would put on the table.
Thank you.
And I'll just add, I thought the slide deck was good. I thought what you told us after during questioning was even more valuable. So as you're thinking about what to present on March 3rd, some of what we got out in response to questions was extremely valuable.
Yeah, all the specific examples were really good.
Would you need like a motion from us, or just that our discussion is fine to note in the minutes?
The discussion is absolutely fine. I think we've all found it helpful. So unless there's a motion that the commission wants to make, which you're more than welcome to do, you don't need to.
Okay. Well, thank you so much again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for your time and attention.
Okay, I'll move on to the next item, which is the down payment assistance loan program. Is there any public comment on that? Okay. Do you have questions on it or discussion? I can kind of recap it if that's needed. Because I don't know that all the commissioners that are currently here now were serving when we first issued the report. So it was originally by, the subcommittee was Commissioner Garrettson and myself and Commissioner Shansky, who's no longer on the commission. And basically, I mean, we wrote it out in the memo, but the brief was sort of to look at certain parameters for a DPA program and just like do some research and sort of gather some information about like what a reasonable subsidy amount might be, what are some parameters we could consider. So we try to put all that together in the report, and we didn't set out to recommend like a specific DPA program one way or another because I don't think that was the ask. And so what we kind of did was have a report that just sort of presented what we found when we talked to a bunch of experts and did some research. And it's all really just there for council to consider. So my general thought on that, speaking as someone from the subcommittee, was to go ahead and like present it to council, let them like weigh what's in there, and then they can come back to us with further questions if they wanted us to look into anything specific, or once the DPA program is on the table, because I think right now there's no like urgency to it, like, yeah, exactly, there's no money for it. And so I didn't think we needed to like go much deeper into the ins and outs of one when it's not, you know, it's not really being considered at any, to be happening anytime soon.
Yeah, I'm gonna ask a clarifying question. Since I wasn't here when we first started talking about this, my read of the report is that it takes a critical eye to the idea of the DPA program in general, and it made me wonder some of the what has been committed to by City Council, the authorization of a DPA program, or money if it becomes available. Could our commission make a recommendation that this is not a smart program right now for our city? I mean, these are my questions.
I mean, I'm sure Kelly could speak to that. I believe the ordinance was to establish one, but it didn't have any parameters, right?
Right, so the ordinance, so council passed an ordinance, about a year ago, I think. And the ordinance is really, think of it like a vessel, but the vessel's empty. So should the city wish to create a down payment assistance program that is separate from an existing, state level program, for example, something new and specific to Davis, then the ordinance allows for that and provides a mechanism or vessel to do that. There is no program, and so the questions that council had that they asked this commission to look into were, do you have thoughts on this or suggestions? What I took from the work that you did was, kind of as you said, suggested, Commissioner, that where there are other programs that might already have rules, regulations, money, etc., if we can capitalize on those, leverage those at all, that would be the first place to start before we set aside money or allocate money that is coming from Davis specifically for a program. So that may be too simplified, but just trying to encapsulate it a little bit.
Yeah, no, I think that's accurate. We set out to research like what would be ideal parameters for a DPA program, and I think I interviewed like a dozen experts, and I think all of them said don't do one. do these other things instead, and that's what we tried to summarize in the report. So, you know, I don't want to speak for the whole commission about whether or not we recommend one, but that's just sort of what we came up with. So I'm fine with making that recommendation if that's what the commission is sort of feeling on it.
Yeah, I thought the report was well done and very informative, and I felt the same way, that it seemed like you covered a lot of the bases, and also you don't have $1 million, which, you know, so I think there's so many things, as evidenced from today's conversation, that we need to invest money in, and this felt to me like a clear not at right now.
Okay. What if we like move to recommend submitting the report to council?
Can I make a comment before?
Yeah,
we
of course, yeah.
And I'm probably heading in the direction you guys, but I
Yeah.
want to talk about it a little bit, and especially on the Mayor Neville just walked in the room. This is for the council, so I think it's helpful. We just recapped why are we talking about a down payment assistance program, and now we're moving to should the fiscal commission make a recommendation. I thought the memo was excellent. I really understood it, and I really appreciate the part where you spoke to so many experts and really lay out some of the issues, because fundamentally, and I have a BA in economics that I've never used professionally, but fundamentally what we're talking about is a supply problem. We don't have enough housing in town, and a down payment assistance program is a demand side solution. It makes people more able to pay for housing. That's the demand curve. It gives them an incentive to come here. It's a solution you would choose if there were two towns that have an oversupply of housing and you want to draw people into your town and not the town next door. That's what a down payment assistance program really would do for you. That's not our problem. We don't have the housing that encourage people to get into. And so, and that sort of comes through. I think you were being neutral in the memo because you didn't want to speak for the fiscal commission. And so I would say, I think the most helpful thing we could do for the commission is give an executive summary of the memo, because the memo is excellent, but it is in depth. And if we're going to give a firm recommendation, maybe they don't have to read the memo, they can see our recommendation and understand we're saying don't do this. So an executive summary in our motion that also makes a clear, direct recommendation that maybe you weren't willing to do in the memo because you wanted to hear our take. Like, that's probably what's most useful to the commission.
And thank you, and I apologize, I did step out for just a moment between the items, and also just perhaps for the benefit of some of you who came on to the commission after council first requested this, and also for Director Pediciado, because he's new here. This was very much an item where the city council asked this commission to say, tell us what we should be thinking about if and when we do actually adopt a down payment assistance program. We do have authority in our city code to have one, but we've not developed an actual program. And really the request of you was what you would be thinking about. And I agree, this is really helpful. I don't believe we were necessarily asking you to weigh in to say you should or you shouldn't, but rather here are some factors you should be taking into account, or we should be taking into account even when we do implement a full program.
Thank you. Yes, that was my understanding, was that we weren't being asked to recommend one way or the other, just to do some research and present some points that we thought were important to consider. So that was where I was sort of going with, maybe we just recommend presenting the report to council. And then if we want to fashion some sort of motion to like highlight the recommendation to particularly look into like other DPA providers that are at the state or federal level, and potentially be connected to the contact that we made with CalHFA. Maybe that would be, I don't know what the feeling of the rest of the commission is on something like that.
So can I suggest 2 items to put into a what should the council be thinking about? And maybe we all add whatever items we think are valuable. One is, there are existing down payment assistance programs, and the first place to start is we should encourage people to use the ones that exist, because that's not our money and it brings people in. So That seems like the lowest hanging fruit. The second is, I think a down payment assistance program would help a very small number of people relative to the number of people we want to help. And so if you could identify a core group of people, public employees, police and fire, teachers, some core group of people that you really want to help, I think that's where a down payment assistance program will be most helpful. If you don't identify a core group, if the goal is to help families with young children, which is a much larger group, this may not be the right tool. So those are the two pieces I would put into a council recommendation to the commission, if you all agree with those.
When we were first tasked with doing this research, I believe we were asked to look more generally at the 80 to 120 AMI and not like limit the target demographic to like a specific workforce. So I don't know. I guess it wouldn't hurt to like highlight it as something to consider, but I don't know that I don't know the utility in like recommending something that we were asked not to look at. You know. Yeah.
Well, I think you do, why I thought the report was so good is because you do touch on some of these things. You touch on workforce housing as a potential replacement option. You also touch on existing state programs.
Yeah.
So I think those sections could be beefed up a little bit, or I think just passed on to council for their review. And I don't know, Neville, if you have other thoughts, but that might be my recommendation.
I'm not going to interfere in how you want to proceed in that respect. That is absolutely your call.
I thought it was great, Nancy.
Thank you. Yeah. No, my thought is it's so complex. Like you know, even changing any of those factors, like the demographic we're targeting, all that, like changes so much of it, and it's like such. It's so complex and it's like beyond, I think, any of our expertise in the subcommittee. That my personal preference would be to just present what we've researched, and then if council later gets closer to developing a Davis DPA program and wants us to look into something more specific, then that might be the time to like take that on and beef up a specific topic that they want us to look into.
Yeah, I would echo that. I mean, I personally don't feel like we need to go as far as making a recommendation or some variant of that. I mean, I think any objective reading of the report, you pretty easily arrive at a conclusion like this is just really tough to have the desired impact. Just math is the dynamics are just really challenging.
So we could also just move to present the council.
I can withdraw the suggestion. I'm comfortable passing with them.
The memo, as I said in the first time that we reviewed this, is really good, very, very well done. We talk about alternatives to the program that are already in existence, which is great, but we really only talk about Cal HFA, and there are many others. And I think that even if we don't go into the detail that we do with Cal HFA, I think it would be helpful to at least represent those that are out there. And so specifically, US HUD, Fannie Mae, Federal Housing Administration, California HUD, Freddie Mac, the Department of Veteran Affairs are ones that I know of that exist. And so I think that instead of just saying that they exist, maybe being more specific. I also want to point out there's an error in, I think it's an error, maybe I'm reading it wrong, on the pages aren't numbered, the third to last page. The third to last page has the bold at the top, applicant or someone in applicant's household. And if you look at the second, or the first round circle bullet, example A, it says if the borrower receives DPA of the amount of $20,000, the borrower must repay the city the original $20,000 DPA loan plus $10,000, representing 5% of the $200,000 appreciation. But this scenario says that there's 20 years of interest, which would be a larger amount than 10,000, and the policy says whichever is greater, the interest rate or the appreciation. So I think the example is not representative of what would happen in that case. You understand what I'm saying?
No.
Okay, so the bullet says they'll pay either the interest rate or their share of the appreciation, and whichever is greater. And then in our example, we say we'd get $10,000 of appreciation. We didn't calculate the interest, which in fact would be $20,000.
Oh, which would be the greater?
Which would be greater.
I see, okay.
Yeah.
I see what you're saying.
Okay.
Okay.
So other than that, I really kind of am in favor of making a recommendation, but I'm happy with the discussion of the rest of the fiscal commission of not doing it, because it is kind of obvious. But it also seems like we're unanimous, and if we're unanimous, it wouldn't be bad to say that we think it's not appropriate, but I'm willing to go either way.
Okay. Let's see. I mean, we can certainly add, it wouldn't be difficult to correct that error and to add some examples of other federal and state providers. So how would we feel about moving to submit this report to council with those two corrections or
I think
additions?
we probably have to do it the way we did the one that's on the consent calendar today. So it's correct the memo,
Okay.
put it on next month's consent calendar, and we'll all look at the changes, and then we can do it by consent next month.
Sounds good to me. Anyone interested in making that motion?
I was just going to add something for your just information, and I didn't want to interrupt the motion, so do your motion and I'm going to add a piece of information.
Okay, I'll move the memo be amended in the way that Commissioner Harper recommended, and we'll put it on the consent calendar for next month with the hope that it passes by consent next month.
Second.
Okay. So we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Okay. So all in favor, say aye. Aye. Any noes or abstentions? Okay, so that passes unanimously with the 6 of us here.
So it sounds like you're bringing it back once you make the correction, so what I was going to say isn't quite as relevant, but I just want to be sure you know that when you transmit something up to council, if it's your desire to designate the chair or commissioner or subcommittee to address council on the matter, then you can take formal action, perhaps at next meeting, to do that if that's your interest.
Okay.
And that way you or whomever you designate would be the authorized person to actually speak on behalf of the commission at the council meeting.
Oh, interesting.
So unlike folks who come up and say, I'm on the fiscal commission, but I'm here tonight in my personal capacity, you'd be able to say, I'm here tonight on behalf of the fiscal commission.
Perfect. We can do that. Cool. We can do that the next meeting, I suppose, when we bring up that consent calendar. Okay. All right. I think that moves us to item 8, the long-range calendar. Any discussion? Public comment? So it sounds like we have stuff for April and May. Are we considering anything for March?
I don't know yet, but Alberto and I will be having some conversations and we'll see if there's anything else. We will get a meeting with the chair and the vice chair to see if there's anything else we need to add.
Okay. And then I think Commissioner Haff earlier brought up to Ms. Yancey about maybe coming back at some point about the strategic plan. So I wonder if that's something we could note in the future.
Yeah, that might be a good thing to do once the budget issues are out of the way.
Yeah.
That way, presumably, the council will have had time to receive the report, finalize it, bless it, and then we can figure out a good time for her to come back. And as we're thinking about that, If there are other aspects of what, while it's fresh in your mind, what she was talking about this evening that you'd like to drill in a little bit deeper, or other questions that raised, any of that kind of feedback is helpful for us so that we can, help prepare what's of interest to you.
I just have some new business when you get there.
Sure, yeah, I think that now's the time.
Okay, so a piece of new business, I was going to suggest, I mentioned this at the last meeting, we might want to make an ad hoc committee on audits, just for this year. It seems like we're going to get a lot of audit documents very, very much back to back to back. I think it would be helpful to have a couple or three, I think we can have an ad hoc committee of 3, right? So 2 or 3 commissioners who can sort of preview what we're getting and come to the fiscal commission with a proposal for just how do we review the volume that we're getting all at once. Particularly because the year-to-year audits kind of tell a story. One of the frustrating things is if you're looking at a 2023 audit that has some recommendations by the auditor, and we know that by 2025 it's resolved. And if we just wait a couple months, we know it will be resolved. And we don't have to discuss that as we're talking about the 2023 audit and accepting that. So just having a couple commissioners look at what's coming and then come to the commission and say, here's what we think is important, here's what we think you ought to be focusing on. Really, the audit that's going to matter the most to us is 2025. But we're going to be looking at the other ones first. So that was a suggestion. It sounds like we would need to ask the city council to make an ad hoc committee for us. So I was going to say, is that something we think would be helpful?
I mean, I think it's a great idea, just, because personally, like when we get the documents to review, like before a fiscal commission meeting, it is a lot and I don't always know exactly what to be looking for. So it would be kind of nice if we had a subcommittee that could look at it in detail ahead of time and sort of highlight the issues that they've spotted. Yeah, I don't know, do others have thoughts on it?
It's a very good recommendation. However, the fact that it is the old years that we're looking at means that, and you're right to point out that they're not as valuable, so do they deserve enough attention to be worthy of making a separate ad hoc committee? I'm not sure. I'm going to be looking at them closely because, frankly, that's what I like to do. So I will, but will it give me a lot of insight? No, because we'll be waiting for the more recent one. If we're on the schedule that staff has informed us that we're on, the waiting time is not long. It's a few months, but it's not a long time. So I'm almost of a mind to say, let's look at them, but let's not spend a heck of a lot of time on the old ones because they're not that beneficial.
I do wonder, Commissioner Harper, the last time we reviewed one of the audits, I found your questions and comments to be super helpful. So I wonder if with the next one, you could maybe give us a little framework for how to think about reviewing them. Because even just listening to how you went through it, I learned a lot because I don't have a background in these kind of audits.
Well, certainly I could, but also staff. Yes. Our new finance director would be the prime person to do that for us. So absolutely, one or the other or both could do that. Yeah.
See, I told you we'd find something for March.
Can I ask a dumb question? What are we supposed to do with the audits? Because ultimately the audit is accepted by the council, but we see it first. So what is our role with the audit? Because if the answer is check it, see that it's an audit and hand it up, well then we don't need to do much. What is our role? How do we help?
So when you receive the audit and the act on the single audit, they're completed. You're not weighing in on them. There's no recommendation we're looking for regarding the work itself. It's really data and information for you to look through and understand. And as you're seeing trends or other information that you're seeing in the documents, Are there then maybe recommendations or a discussion or something you are concerned about that you'd like to have a presentation from staff on that would pertain to the city's fiscal health and fiscal situation? So it's really more of a foundational background document, much like the planning commission is going to have their general plan that they're going to be focusing on. The financials are can be foundational to the work that you're doing along with the budget piece. So, does that answer your question, or?
It does, and with that clarification, we probably don't need an ad hoc committee, that helps.
Okay. Okay, any further discussion? Finish up this item? Okay, great, well then, the next item is adjournment. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion
Okay,
to adjourn.
I'll second. Okay, all in favor say aye. All right, with that we're adjourned.